We kind of joke a lot and all the time that there's never really a dull moment in the news cycle when it comes to LSU football. And that was probably no more evident really than the last few days. Obviously, you knew yesterday, National Signing Day, there's going to be plenty. You have the Eli Ricks news last night. And then today, Myles Brennan announces via clip from Wolf of Wall Street that he's not leaving, that he's coming back, pulling his name out of the transfer portal, come back for one more year of eligibility at LSU. That immediately raised questions about would he play the Texas Bowl? I would imagine not, and I think that's actually probably a good thing. Let Myles get healthy. Let him focus on spring. Let him focus on next football season. The future is more important. Not to diminish the Texas Bowl. Of course, you want to go win, but obviously eyes when it comes to Myles Brennan, more on the future. It's a massive get for Brian Kelly and LSU to have Myles pull his name out of the transfer portal. We all knew they'd go in the transfer portal, didn't necessarily know, even though there are rumors that it would be a player who wouldn't have to transfer back in.
Man, I hear the excitement in your voice, man, and I think a lot of LSU fans agree with you because this is big. We talked about it yesterday. The numbers were going to be smaller with LSU's recruiting class this time around, and they ended up signing 13 players. And what did we say? They're going to have to dip into the transfer portal specifically for these two positions. So now essentially you have 15 in this class, and you have two huge gets here with Myles Brennan and with Miles Frazier because these are positions in need, Musso. We'll talk about the quarterback dynamic for this team going forward, but to get Frazier out of FIU and to get an offensive lineman of that caliber that was sought after by multiple schools, including NC State, amongst others, is big for LSU. So not just Myles Brennan and Miles Frazier coming, but the timing of when they're coming and the position that they play is huge for LSU.
It is. And I mean, look, there's no bigger position than quarterback, is there? And especially for LSU, you needed a veteran. You got a veteran and you got someone who's familiar with the program, familiar with the culture here. Everyone, you know the story for Myles Brennan, right? 2017, his freshman year, behind Danny Etling, gets thrown into the Troy game, dealt with a little bit of injury that year. 2018, LSU gets Joe Burrow. Myles sits patiently, waits his turn. 2018 and 2019, it's finally his time in 2020. He starts out the season a little bit rough maybe against Mississippi State, but progresses each week through 2020. Ends up having that injury at Missouri, but up until that point, over 1,100 yards, 11 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, threw for 430 in that game against Mizzou, but that injury knocks him out. He's coming into this year, going to battle for the job with Max Johnson. The accident at the fishing camp, he's out for the year, enters his name in the transfer portal the week of the Alabama game, but now pulls it out. Myles Brennan provides stability at this position for LSU. You have to imagine that considering he has 1 year left of eligibility, he's been pretty close to, if not totally assured, that it's his job and there's no battle really to be had, and that Myles Brennan is your starting quarterback going forward.
100%. You would think. We'll see what happens going forward, but people in the chat are talking about the possibility of him playing in the bowl game. Like you said, a lot of reports, including one from Brody Miller in The Athletic, says that he is not going to play. Could he physically play if he really wanted to? Maybe, but like you're saying, it's not worth it, given the timeline after the injury and given everything that's going on. So Myles being back is very interesting, to say the least. I mean, the odyssey of this guy coming out of high school is unreal. He was a superstar in high school, coming out of Mississippi. You laid out everything that happened since he got to LSU, but the reality is it's been a long time. But the last time we saw Myles Brennan, he was playing really good football, and he was in a quarterback competition with Max Johnson coming into this season. We don't know exactly what would have happened, but a lot of people think that Myles maybe had the leg up in that competition, especially after seeing Max Johnson's play throughout the course of 2021. But like you said, he brings a veteran presence to this team. He brings a little bit of familiarity at a time where a lot of things are in flux. And yes, you're trying to take the next step. You're trying to make some changes. But I think it's really good for LSU football to have a quarterback that has experience playing not just in the SEC, but with a lot of guys on this team in particular. And that experience is going to loom huge for Myles Brennan. And obviously the potential that still exists is really interesting because now at least he gets to end his career on his own accord. It's not going to end after an injury. It's not going to end after an unfortunate circumstance. He might finally break that stat that we've been talking about so much on this station about it's been since 2012 that LSU recruited a quarterback and that quarterback finished his whole college career at LSU. That might happen for Myles Brennan, and it might be a storybook ending. It has potential to be, at least.
and it provides stability in the veteran presence that you needed. That's what you were looking for in the transfer portal at quarterback, and you end up getting it. And the stability is needed for this offense as well. I mean, you bring back Myles, who, we ran through the numbers that he went through in 2020. It was progressively getting better week by week. Ended with a 430-yard performance before the injury. You add that type of talent to the receiver room of Kayshon Boutte, Brian Thomas, Jack Besh. That's stability. That's the veteran leadership that you're going to need to lead that group going forward. Think about how great it was in 2020 early with Myles Brennan throwing to Terrace Marshall.
Yeah.
You can have that again now with the current crop of receivers you have on campus. And a lot of guys on this offense now probably a little bit more inclined to not look elsewhere, knowing you have that type of veteran presence, leadership, and talent coming back at the quarterback position.
So let's quickly recap since Myles entered the portal. A couple weeks ago, or last week, I should say, we talked about him posting a cryptic Instagram picture of him wearing an LSU helmet, but there wasn't really that much smoke around it. Like, the perception was he was still probably going to go somewhere else. There's reports that Nebraska was maybe interested. There's a common link there with Bill Bush, who used to be a secondary coach at LSU. Now he's an analyst over at Nebraska. So people were definitely after him, and I don't know how much he was considering LSU or staying at LSU, but we do know, according to lots of reports, including one from Ross Dellinger at SI, that Brian Kelly personally reached out to Myles Brennan and talked about him coming back to LSU and what opportunity that would present. And I'm curious what you think that conversation went like, because I don't think Brian Kelly guaranteed Myles Brennan the starting job, but I think he was very transparent with the situation that's going on and exactly what he's looking for in his starting quarterback. And like we said, the experience that Myles Brennan has might play a large part in that conversation and what he can bring to LSU in staying, but he's definitely still going to compete for this quarterback competition to be the starter.
I would be floored if Myles Brennan is not the starting quarterback for LSU. You can call it a guarantee, whatever you want. The guy's got 1 year of eligibility left to play. He's going somewhere where he can play. That's what the transfer portal is. That's what it's about. When you have 1 year left, you're not going to go somewhere where you might not play and have to enter the transfer portal again. I mean, that's my thought on it. I think Myles knows this is his route to playing immediately, is staying at LSU, and you're going to be there with a coach who has proven to have good offenses and being able to develop quarterbacks fairly well. I mean, I think all of that played into the decision. That's why I think he's back. And again, there's the familiarity that we talked about and just being comfortable here. Myles has stuck with LSU now through just about everything imaginable in an era where players don't do that anymore. So for him to not have at least some type of assurance that at least he's the leader in the clubhouse for the job, that's how I see it, just because he's got 1 year left and he could have gone anywhere. He's going to go somewhere where he knows he can play.
Yes, he's the leader in the clubhouse, but I bet you Garrett Nussmeier doesn't agree with that. If that was the case, you would think he's going to go the way of TJ Finley, and maybe after the spring he is the odd man out. But I'm not going to speculate any of that. I do agree that Myles will be the starter. I just think he has a big leg up on these guys, and whoever the second string guy is could still be the quarterback of the future. Like I said, Nussmeier might end up being the odd man out here, but we'll see what happens. It's going to be really interesting to see what that does to that dynamic, Musso, because Walker Howard has so much expectation coming in, but the reality is we've never seen him play on this level. We've seen a lot of guys with a lot of hype come in before and not really live up to that. And Nussmeier is a guy that at least got some experience this year, and he was a superstar coming out of high school as well. And we'll continue to monitor this situation going into the bowl game. But if LSU is able to get that waiver, that does give Nuss at least a little bit of an advantage going into next season.
The only guy you've seen play at this level is Myles Brennan.
True.
That's it. That is the only one. I don't want to go too long here, but I do want to get a thought in on Myles Frazier before we head to break, because this is, for me, a massive get for LSU, literally and figuratively. 6'5", 304 pounds. This is a guy who's a two-star coming out of high school, spends the year at FIU, enters the transfer portal after a freshman All-American season, is now a 4-star in the transfer portal, has 3 years of eligibility left. This is basically like getting a high school recruit is kind of what this is, but he's already proven he's an All-American, at least on the college level. It just continues to bolster your offensive line class for the 2022 cycle, which how many times have we talked about Brian Kelly and his acumen along the offensive line of developing talent. You potentially have your 2 bookend tackles next year. Now, if Will Campbell comes in and starts as a freshman and you plug and play Myles Frazier, and you have them both for multiple years now, this is a massive, massive get for LSU and just continues what has been a phenomenal early signing period. Honestly, even numbers aside, just the positions of need that you filled, it's been great so far for LSU.
Yeah, with the context of Brian Kelly coming in and being new to this at LSU, it's big getting Frazier is. And like you said, position need at offensive line, but also that's Kelly's specialty is finding these offensive linemen that go on to be the backbone of the offense. They're all the good offenses that he's ever coached, as he said in his introductory press conference. So getting Myles Brennan as well as getting Myles Frazier is huge. It basically adds to this list of 13 at the 2 most important positions for LSU, being quarterback and offensive line. And it adds to a young LSU offensive line, Musso, that I think has a little bit of potential going forward. And now this unit can kind of grow together, and you can have continuity going forward, not just for this season, but throughout the beginning of the Brian Kelly era. And I'm sure Myles Frazier will be a big part of that.
And now you can turn your attention to February, where LSU can just bolster this class even more. Don't be surprised if those Tigers end up with the top 5 class in the conference. In the SEC, don't be surprised if they don't sneak their way up into the top 5. And if do that in a transition year. Think about what Florida's going through. Compare transition years.
Yeah.
For a job that's in a talent-rich state, and many think it's one of the best jobs. They're behind Vanderbilt. Mm-hmm. You have a chance to sneak into the top 5 in this conference in a transition year recruiting, and I think you have a really good shot to do that.
What did we talk about yesterday? The power of the brand. Despite everything that's going on, despite all the unanswered questions, people see the potential here at LSU. And the last time they fired a coach, obviously they built it up to be what they were in 2019 really quickly. And the last 3 head coaches all found that success before they left LSU. So it's really exciting, not just that opportunity to be at LSU and all the opportunities that it presents. Brian Kelly talked about it a lot when he got hired, but also a chance to be part of the new era. Like, everybody talks about 2019 like it's the best year around these parts, because it is, bar none. But these guys see the potential to get there, or to get even farther, and that's got to be a really enticing opportunity if you're part of this new journey at LSU